You're not a bad person because you don't know everything. Knowing the sum total of knowledge in the universe is not how you stay safe. You stay safe by surrounding yourself with safe people who love you and will treat you nicely even if you make mistakes. Hello, and welcome back to the Neurodivergent Creative. Today, I was going to talk to you about one little note that I have written down in my notepad about imposter syndrome. And then I was like, but what about my psychology, the psychosocial stages? And then I was looking into which stage is up next, and it totally aligns with what I was going to talk about with imposter syndrome. So hello, pull up a chair, or don't if you're driving in your car. Don't pull up a chair right now. You are in a chair. Pay attention to the road. Okay, so the next stage, if you have been following along, I'm going through Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, and these are not necessarily exclusively childhood development, but the most of the stages are in childhood. And then we still have some stages as we are aging, and eventually, the final stage is where we're no longer developing because we died. Sorry, man. My ADHD meds have worn off for the day. That keeps happening. I'm recording in the late afternoon, and that's on me. So awesome. Anyway, stage 4 of the psychosocial stages is industry versus inferiority. And this has now a pretty large age range. So we had basic trust versus mistrust, which is age 0 to 1. That's infancy. And then we have, I think it's shame. Autonomy versus shame, and that's early childhood from age 1 to 3. And then we have initiative versus guilt. That is in what the little chart here calls play age. So that's sort of your preschool age, where you don't have to be in school learning things per se yet, but you are learning by playing and seeing things modeled. So that's age 3 to 6. And now industry versus inferiority is school age, which is roughly 5 to 12. Rad, right? That's a range. That's a range of time from 5 to 12. So as I was reading over the write-up of this stage, I was thinking this is definitely where a lot of neurodivergent kids start to diverge from, this is where stuff starts getting really difficult, I think, for the neurodivergent kids in school, especially because with this industry versus inferiority, a lot of the feeling of industry, the feeling of confidence and in your skills comes from reinforcement. So reinforcement from your peers that what you're doing is good, peers, reinforcement from your teachers about what you are doing is good, reinforcement from your parents. And neurodivergent kids maybe are not fitting the norm of what people would expect to see. And so even though they're trying, ADHD is really coming to mind here. This is where a lot of boys will start to get diagnosed with ADHD because they can't pay attention in math class, and they keep fidgeting, or they keep pacing, or they can't just quietly read their paragraph that they need to read. And unfortunately, without really good special education intervention and teachers and parents being quite aware of the way that different neurodivergent issues show up in children, those kids are going to get labeled problem kids, talkers, class clowns. It's going to be rough. And then that sets them up to feel inferior because they can't help that they're not like all the other kids who can follow the directions the way that the teachers are telling them. Their brains are different, but we have no idea that our brains are different because we're 5, So let's jump into it. Okay. So this is industry versus inferiority. And it is largely school. So age 5, that's kindergarten. Age 11 to 12, that's 6th grade. So we're looking at elementary school age here. And then we get into adolescence and hormones and stuff. So we're prepubescent right now in our discussion of psychosocial development. So industry is when children are encouraged. So they put together a tower of blocks and their parents say, wow, so good. You did so great with that tower of blocks. Versus, I don't know if I showed you guys this one in one of my last ones, but this is little autistic baby Caitlin making a train out of canned goods in the kitchen. So a lot of people would look at that and say, my kid is playing weird, or my kid is playing wrong. My kid doesn't play like other kids. Let's pathologize it. And that's sort of the same thing that can happen in these like early elementary school years where the neurodivergence begins to neurodiverge. Okay, maybe you don't notice ADHD in pre-K because all the kids have impulse control when they're 4, you know? But now that we are getting into where most of the kids can line up in a straight line and most of the kids can count to 3 when they go to the water fountain and not, I don't know, just sit there and slurp and make funny sounds. I hated the 1, 2, 3 tap at the water fountain. Do they still do that? Do we still have water fountains, or is everything like a water bottle dispenser? I don't even know. Water fountains seem filthy to me in a post-COVID world. But let's go back to the industry so that I do not get off topic on my show about being neurodivergent. So here's where kids start to learn cooperation, cooperative play. So not just parallel play, which is pretty common in those like early childhood years. And also in like the early elementary. So like, you know, maybe one kid's playing at a play kitchen and the other kid is doing blocks and like they're all just sort of near each other, hanging out and playing. That's parallel play. And then we also start to see collaborative play, which is like, I don't know if you watch Bluey, but the kids do cooperative play really beautifully in Bluey. So they'll be like, oh, we're going to play witches. And then it's like, okay, you're the mom witch and we're the daughter witches. And here's what we do. Or we're going to be on a farm and you're the scarecrow and you're this and you're that. And that's very industrious, right? This is that sense of industry, that sense of putting something together and other people affirm it. Very super duper helpful when you are growing a confident, tiny human who's going to be able to exist in the world. On the other hand, they get a sense of inferiority if they are constantly being negated, if you are giving them lots of notes like, oh, we don't want to do it like that. Let's try it like this. Let's go over here. Not quite. That was wrong. Let's do it again. There are ways to address incorrect answers, mistakes, even like problem behavior. You know, if somebody is pulling somebody else's hair or they're stealing somebody else's toys, like we need to address that. This isn't saying just let kids do whatever they want so that they feel confident. No, like parenting and education, teaching are very much about knowing what is developmentally appropriate and responding within those barriers and those limits. So like, is it normal for a 2-year-old to bite? Yes, but we don't want to send home notes about Billy bit Susie again. So we try to train Billy out of biting. Just because it's developmentally appropriate doesn't mean we run amok with it. Okay, so just stating that out there for people who want to be like, oh, Caitlin says let your kids do whatever they want. That's not what I was saying. I see you. I can't see you. And I don't know if you're talking shit about me, and you're probably not, but I have anxiety. So also with the introduction of school, kids are learning like social demands. They are learning expectations. They are in a situation where their parents are not there to guide them. And so they are looking to teachers as an authority figure. And so now we start getting like other authority figure adults who kids learn to respect, value. Ideally, like kids can go to a teacher to talk about something hard that they are going through. Like a lot of the times teachers are like the first line of defense in like abuse or neglect cases. Like you can get a report from the school that they suspect, you know, something bad going on at home. Teachers are important and we undervalue them in this country. So if you have a kid in school, get their teacher something nice this week. That's your homework from Caitlin. Okay. Also, at this stage, the child's peer group also grows in importance. And so here is where kids start comparing themselves to other kids. This is where a lot of parents start saying, oh, well, if Jimmy jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too? And the answer for some kids is yes, if Jimmy's doing it, it must be really cool. I hate that one. I hate, oh, well, if they jumped off a bridge, would you do it too? Because I don't know, man. I feel like that's different than going to the movies or to the roller rink or whatever it is that my mom didn't want me to do. So when it comes to teachers and giving encouragement or feedback to students, this is where like education as a system can show us where problems are. Because if you have like a small class size, you've only got 8, 10, 15 students per teacher, they can spot things individually a lot easier than they can if they have 30 or 40 kids in a room. When I was a daycare aide, we had limits. I think we could only have 8 kids to 1 adult. And I was in the, not quite preschool, I was in like the 3+ room, which is where the kids are like, they're out of the toddler room, but they're not potty trained yet. And they have to be potty trained before they can go to the preschool room. So we were like this intermediate stage where the kids weren't potty trained. And you could only take 4 kids to the bathroom at a time, but they could leave one person with 8 kids, which means you know exactly what it means. It means I was changing a lot of frickin' diapers. Cool. There are many reasons I'm child-free, and one of them is that I did all my diaper changing in my early 20s. Not necessarily. I would still change a diaper. Actually, there's a person who I met doing like a volunteer thing, and we became Facebook friends. And she recently posted on Facebook that she just needed like some help, just somebody to come over and hold a baby so she could take a shower. And I was like, oh my God, I will totally come over and hold your baby. So I haven't done that yet, but the offer stands. So if you ever need somebody to hold a baby, I love holding babies. I'm not going to love changing diapers, but I'll do it for you because I want you to take a nap or a shower or something. And I'll probably try and do your dishes too, if you don't kick me out of your house. Honestly, people who just had kids, let people take care of you. Let people do your dishes. You don't have to chase them out of your house and be like, no, I'll take care of it. You just hold a baby while I do my dishes. Hell no, you hold your baby. You made that baby. Whatever. Now I'm off on a baby tangent. So kids are in school. It's kindergarten. It's first grade. It's second grade. We're learning to read. We're learning basic math. We are learning a lot of things and creating a lot of new neural pathways in the brain. Now, I feel like I mentioned this before. Autistic brains do not prune the way non-autistic brains do. So typically, when you're like a little teeny baby, your neural pathways are constantly like, oh my God, cool, new information. And then eventually, your brain says, I have established the baseline level of information I need. I will now go through the brain and prune out these neural pathways, these connections in the brain that we don't need. You know, they're kind of inefficient. There are too many pathways for information to cross over. And so they prune things. But the autistic brain does not prune very effectively. And so that is why we have 14,000 thoughts all at once, and why you can say bumblebee and then we can be like, that reminds me of a time I went to the circus. Because that shit is all crazy interconnected up in our freaking brains that don't know how to maintain themselves. Okay, rant over. Synaptic pruning. It's a thing. Synaptic pruning. Okay. So kids are learning, right? That's the good thing. We are learning life skills even, you know, like how to get along with people, how to navigate a conflict with a friend, how to deal with it when you forgot your homework, right? How to deal with disappointments. Like say a 6-year-old forgot to get their permission slip signed, and so they don't get to go on the field trip. Is that an ADHD problem? Maybe they forgot something. Is it a parenting problem? Maybe they didn't check the backpack. Is it definitely this kid is majorly disappointed and we need to show them that it's okay? 100%. What I hate seeing is people being like, well, that's the consequence. You forgot, and so that's the consequence. Okay, but this is like a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old. They have to learn how to deal with disappointment, not just be blamed for it. That goes right back to this industry versus inferiority. The industrious winning thing, like the good outcome of this stage of development would be that they learn to get their permission slips signed, not through like threat, not through being told that they're inferior if they do forget, but in modeling how to not forget next time. Like we seriously, adults and children alike, we have to learn how to manage disappointment. Grown-ass men are bad at that, okay? Grown-ass men need, I was going to say cis white men, but I don't even know. I don't think it's just cis white men. I think it's a man problem in general, because now I'm going to go on a patriarchy tangent. The patriarchy harms men too. Okay, so obviously we know that it harms women gender nonconforming people, right? Trans, non-binary, all this. If you're not a dude, you're oppressed. But if you are a dude, you are still harmed by this system that doesn't let you get to know your emotions, that calls you a sissy if you cry, that tells you that you should only be attracted to one kind of person, right? Like, God forbid a guy is into somebody who isn't like, quote unquote, hot or pretty or conventionally attractive. It's like men are like crabs in a bucket, right? One of them starts to go do something out of the norm and the rest of them pull him back into the bucket and say, no, stay in our bucket of sad patriarchy where we don't get to cry. And I am so sorry to all of those little boys who didn't get taught how to feel their feelings, but you are making that our problem. Go to therapy. I love you so much. Go to therapy. That's what I have for you. So not only like disappointment, but kids need to deal with failure. I've got my first D grade in 4th grade. So also my parents' divorce was like super, super rough at this point in my life. They're getting in there pretty good. It's custody battles. It's nasty. And I remember in 4th grade, that's when I needed to get glasses. And I felt so anxious about needing glasses. Like I was so worried about how much they cost. I'm 9. How do I know how to be stressed about money? They must have been freaking out about money around me somewhere. I don't remember anything specific, but I do remember being mortified that I was going to cost them money for my new glasses. This is when I started reading the Animorphs books. That was a real winner. I loved that one. But also, amidst the divorcing and stuff, I was not keeping up on my homework, and I really did feel inferior in 4th grade. I feel like I did so good in school every other year except 4th grade. In 4th grade, I look back and I'm like, no, I was phoning it in. And when I wasn't phoning it in, I was freaking out that I wasn't good enough. But, then I passed 4th grade and I went to 5th grade, and 5th grade was way better. I got to go to a different school for 5th grade, so that helped a little bit. It was nice. I also did not love my 4th grade teacher. And looking back, it's probably because I was having a terrible time and she had no idea I was having a terrible time. So she was reacting to a kid who wasn't doing their homework very well. Perspective. So when kids have this sense of industry reinforced, they get confident. They start to think into the future and they think about goals. They think about desires and stuff that they want to achieve. And they have the confidence to know that they can go for it. And ideally, they also know that they can trust their parents or teachers or caregivers to support them. They know that they have autonomy and they are allowed to drive certain decisions. Like all of these stages scaffold on each other. And that's good and bad because, say you missed one, right? Like your basic trust versus mistrust. Infancy was hard. Maybe you had postpartum depression, right? Maybe you didn't get that trust like fully locked in. As long as you show up and start reinforcing that trust as your child goes through the rest of these stages, like we're not talking permanent damage here. But if, say, after a divorce or something, like this kid's life is super mixed up and like there's not consistency in their care routines because they're going back and forth and it's not a very healthy situation, then you can start missing like a few stages in a row where like the shame, the guilt, the inferiority, those are going to start to layer. And that's damaging. Not permanent damage, good therapy helps and reading lots of books helps. But overall, like I have a lot of shame and guilt and inferiority. And this kind of leads into my imposter syndrome topic that I was going to start off with this week, which is that in my industry versus inferiority moment, stage of my life, I got very attached to the fact that I was very smart. So I was like, this is probably more into like my middle school years. So like the next stage will probably reflect a lot more on this era of my life. But like once I started becoming like the straight A student, that became my identity. And I did feel this sense of like not moral superiority, but just like I did feel superior because I was smart, because I was above average. That makes you feel good. It makes you feel good to hear you're special. And so I had this sense of being like a high performing, high achieving, very good student. Teachers loved me. I never got in trouble. I was an excellent student in middle and high school and college. But I am now almost 38. So I have been out of high school for 20 years. It's fine. 20 years. And you know how I mentioned in like the earlier stages, kids just sort of assume that like everybody's family looks like their family because that's what they know. I just sort of assumed that like everybody went to college and got a degree and everybody was really interested in learning more stuff about the world and other people. And I am 38 and I'm looking at the Facebook comments on my local news articles, and that is not the case. That is not the case. So when I go through life assuming that most people are, no, not even that. I was going to say, assuming that most people know things that I know, it's that I thought that what I know is average. I compared myself, I moved myself into the middle of the bell curve. And like, I'm not that special. I have a degree in psychology and Spanish, double major, psychology, Spanish. I have a bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree in higher education. I worked in a career center, like with students, helping them with their resumes and stuff. That has now come back to help me because I have a job as a career coach. And I have a lot of different experiences, including the fact that as an autistic person, I have fallen into special interest rabbit holes and learned a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff in my lifetime. There was a time when I wanted to become a doula, and so I learned a lot about birth and pregnancy. And I know a lot. I know more about pregnancy and birth than some people who have been pregnant and given birth. And that doesn't make me like a better person than them. It kind of means that they're living their life and I'm reading a book, right? So it's not the same as lived experience. I want to be very clear. I know that like academic interest in something does not equate to people who have lived through it. But I also know that most people are not pushing themselves to learn the way that I do. I like to learn. The more I learn about different cultures, the better I can relate to people. Like the more connected I feel to humanity, as opposed to just sort of like being this little microcosm of like my own life. I like knowing how I fit into the vast spectrum of human condition. That's not necessarily normal. That's something that I have been putting together. So this note that I have about imposter syndrome is you get this sense of imposter syndrome when you assume that your skills are average. So because I assume that everybody around me must seek new knowledge the way I do, must want to understand other cultures the way I do, must think about their own brains processing the way I do. Well, compared to the people who do study those things, maybe I am a novice, but compared to the average American, I have a lot more knowledge and education, etc. And that's not an inferiority or superiority thing. That's just data. That's a data point. That's me reminding myself, like, hey, not everything has to be a dissertation. Not everything has to include every single nuance of every factoid that you know about this topic. You can just say some stuff and people will go on with their day. And that set me really, really free because part of my OCD, part of my anxiety is obsessing over the risk of being misunderstood. And I don't like when people misunderstand me. And I also don't like to feel like I'm stupid. I don't like to feel like you think I'm stupid, which goes back to this inferiority and industry thing. But like, if I say something like, I love strawberry ice cream, and somebody else comes in and is like, did you know that strawberry ice cream is destroying the planet and the environment? I will panic because I didn't know that. Because I didn't know that I should have Googled, is strawberry ice cream destroying the planet, before I post about strawberry ice cream. And that, my beloveds, is not normal. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do all that. You're not a bad person because you don't know everything. Knowing the sum total of knowledge in the universe is not how you stay safe. You stay safe by surrounding yourself with safe people who love you and will treat you nicely, even if you make mistakes. And that is on industry versus inferiority. Some failure may be necessary so that the child can develop some modesty. Again, a balance between competence and modesty is necessary. That's another thing. When I was a kid and I was good at something, if I celebrated that I was good at something, then I got shamed. Then I got shamed for being too big for my britches, or it's going to my head, or I'm full of myself and I'm self-centered and I'm arrogant. And so I had to be compulsively modest and compulsively humble, and I was never allowed to revel in my successes because that would get me shamed. And now I have to write that down and talk to fucking Jared about it. Jared, shamed for recognizing my successes. Great. You heard it here, folks. I'm talking to Jared about that. Okay, I'm going to leave us here. I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. I'll see you next week.
They'll change your approach and tell you a joke to lighten your load and help you along or sing you a song. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do.